Does humanity trend toward dystopia or utopia? And should we have hope in humanity? Maybe start with you this time.
To my mind, the question of whether humanity tends towards dystopia or utopia is sort of a contingent matter. It's not predetermined. It depends on the actions of free individuals, and so I think we need to work hard to make it tend towards a utopia, but it is not a given conclusion. I think if we ensure that our arguments and approaches are reasonable, and if we also aim for kind of the highest aspirations of mankind, sort of not just focused on material goods, that also, but also seeking meaning, trying to develop the person as a whole, I think in general we'll be tending more towards utopia. But in the absence of reason, or in the absence of those higher aspirational goals, I think we can tend towards dystopia. But a lot of it is dependent on what we as individuals and as communities do. Should we have faith in, or hope in humanity? I mean, I think we should. And I sort of understand hope as fixing one's attention on the possibility of a good outcome, even in the face of difficulties. And I think there are real difficulties and problems, challenges that we're confronting. But I think there are reasons for hope. I mean, the central section of Stephen's book, Enlightenment Now, traces the extraordinary progress over the centuries with regard to longevity, with regard to literacy, with regard to declines in violence. There are signs of hope. I think there are signs of concern as well. Levels of trust have declined. Levels of meaning and purpose seem to be higher in poorer developing countries than the richer developed world. So have there been losses there? Sense of community participation has been declining. So I think there are indications that we ought to be concerned as well. And again, I think the ultimate outcome really is dependent on what we do as individuals, as a community. And I think this comes down to because the human person is free, that even with the best science, the best technology, the best reason, there's no guarantee that we will use those tools for good. Reason and science can help point towards what's good, but can't make a person good. And so, for that, again, I think we need to work as individuals and as a community towards that goodness. But I think there are limits there. And so I think if we're hoping for a perfect rationality or a perfect goodness in this life, I think we're bound to be disappointed. And I think for that, I would suggest our ultimate hope is in a different horizon. It's a hope in God to bring about a more final and complete transformation.
Before I go to Steve, there's another part of this about the Enlightenment perspective, suggesting that human mistakes and wrongdoing are due to a lack of knowledge and can therefore be corrected with, perhaps with technology and engineering. And yet the Christian belief of brokenness, that all humans are inherently broken and only made right through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so I do think reason and understanding are important. I do think that can range from sort of moral education to trying to understand the implications of policy decisions and trying to do so in a thoughtful and rigorous manner. But again, I do think there are limits, and it is within the capacity of individual human persons to do a great deal of harm. The war in Ukraine has obviously caused a great deal of devastation. And if the decisions of one man, Putin, go in one direction versus another, the choice to, say, employ nuclear warfare. I mean, the devastation could be much greater. We don't know. It is, I think, really a contingent matter. And so, yes, I do think there is sort of a brokenness to the human person. I think even when we want to do good, we often do not. I think there is a need for some sort of help and restoration in that regard. That's not to downplay the importance of reason, the importance of moral formation that can take place through ordinary means, but I think it's important to understand the limits as well.
Thank you, Steve. You've written a lot about this.
Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
Can summarize, but our MIT audience doesn't necessarily have all read all of your awesome books, so you're going to have to.
I have written 2 books that have kind of pigeonholed me as an optimist because they present, I think in true MIT spirit, and I did spend 22 years here, data on human flourishing, showing, and as Tyler has mentioned, when you plot measures of human flourishing to the extent that we can measure them over time, they all show an increase. Not everywhere all the time. That would be a miracle, and progress is not a miracle. Progress consists of at least in the Enlightenment spirit, which gave me the title of the book, Enlightenment Now, I would say it's the use of knowledge to enhance flourishing. So I would not say that a lack of progress is due only to a deficit in knowledge, because the knowledge has to be deployed in service of human flourishing. And you can have application of ingenuity together with brute force to further aims that are contrary to human flourishing. And so, for example, Putin's desire for a great Eurasian civilization centered in Russia and the suffering of the people of Ukraine, and for that matter of Russia, be damned. Greatness is the ultimate good. If that's your goal, then all the knowledge in the world is not going to make us better off. It has to be a combination of understanding how the world works and using that knowledge to make people better off, to further the goals that both Tyler and I mentioned of health and happiness and education and culture and so on. So all of the measures of human flourishing, such as safety and longevity and literacy and happiness and freedom, none of them are a straight line. None of them are even monotonic. And we have seen just in the last couple of years some reversals, including the deaths in war, which since 1946, putting aside even the carnage of World War II, the graph kind of looks like that. It's a declining sawtooth. But the last year, there is definitely an uptick. It's taken us back to the level of about 1989. So it's wiped out about 25 years of progress, hopefully temporarily. But it's just one example of how things can get worse, but on average, they've tended to get better. Not through any miracle, not through any moral arc bending toward justice, but just because to the extent that people work toward flourishing and increase their knowledge, if we remember the things that worked, try not to repeat our mistakes, we can gradually increment upwards. But despite that, the notion of utopia actually gives me the willies. If you look at utopian movements, they have all led to bloodbaths. Nazism, Maoism, Cambodia, Pol Pot, the French Revolution. We should be terrified at the notion of a utopia. Now, is that a contradiction with the desire that human progress has happened and that it is possible that we will enjoy much more? No, for a couple of reasons. One of them is, even though I don't think that as a Jewish atheist, I'm going to leave Jesus out of it, so I don't think that that is part of the of an agenda for flourishing. But there are themes in religions, including Christianity, that reflect distilled human insight, and one of them is that we are flawed creatures. The way I would put it is that we're products of evolution, but we're not angels, and that any social organization has to take into account the capacity of humans toward rather nasty goals, including raw exploitation, as we see in slavery, sadism, the thirst for revenge, the ability that we all have to cultivate sadism, malevolent ideologies such as Putinism, the kind of romantic authoritarian nationalism that puts the glory of empires and civilizations above the flourishing of men, women, and children. So there are a lot, we have the capacity to do awful things. But we also have what Abraham Lincoln called the better angels of our nature. I believe that there is such a thing as human nature, and that is harmonious with some themes in Christianity. I don't think we are blank slates. I don't think we can be perfected. But we do have countering our inner demons, if you will, our ugly motives, such as dominance and revenge and sadism. We also have a capacity for empathy. By default, we don't apply it very broadly. We tend only to empathize with our family, our friends, cute little fuzzy baby animals, and that's about it. But the circle of empathy can be expanded outward by processes of cosmopolitanism, meeting people who are unlike you, reading the first-person experiences of people unlike you, just realizing rationally, cognitively, that other people have the capacity to flourish and suffer as you do, and that it is incoherent to wish for yourself what you would not grant to others. And what has changed over time, the reason that progress is possible, is that we've developed institutions and norms that are likelier to bring out our better angels, our capacity for self-control, our capacity for empathy, our capacity for reason. The reason that I think it's not a paradox or contradiction to note that utopian movements have led to de facto dystopias, to nightmares, is that different dimensions of human flourishing, for one thing, vary across individuals and certainly across cultures. So for one culture, a vision of utopia might be one of modesty, that women are clad from head to toe. For another, it would be freedom, and women can wear whatever they want. For one, it might be sobriety and restraint. For another, it might be partying and celebrating and getting drunk. So any utopian vision that is enforced, or indeed any attempt to implement one's own utopian vision, will naturally lead to totalitarianism, because there are all these other people, these nuisances out there who want something different from what I want. And so if I'm implementing my utopia, I've got to squash down all those people who have a different vision of utopia. So that's one reason why utopian projects tend to be totalitarian. Also, if you have a vision that doesn't just claim, as I think many of us would, certainly that I would, that there's room for improvement, but that there is a vision of perfection, then anyone who stands in the way, well, they're standing in the way of something that could be infinitely good forever. How much righteous violence are you entitled to expend to prevent them from bringing infinite happiness forever into being? Well, as much as you want. They are kind of infinitely evil, and no measure to repress them or eliminate them is unjustifiable if infinite goodness is your vision. That's one reason. Another is that there are inherently trade-offs even among people who hold the same values, and we don't all hold exactly the same values. So for example, a vision of flourishing would be you do things that are in your long-term interest, that keep you healthy, that work to your own benefit. Pushing against that is human freedom. The problem with human freedom is people can have the freedom to screw up their lives. They can spend too much time on social media to their long-term detriment. They can drink too much. They can eat too much. They can not exercise enough. If we were to achieve perfection in terms of people only doing things that were good for them in the long run, then we would need the social media police, and we'd need the junk food Gestapo, and we need prohibition. So freedom and flourishing can trade off. They're two different dimensions of freedom. There is no optimum that would maximize one unless it came at the expense of the other. Another one is, since we're not all identical, we differ in our talents, we differ in our temperaments. If you have perfect freedom, you will also have inequality. Some people are more enterprising, some people are harder working, some people will start businesses that will make them billionaires, others won't. If you want to prevent that from happening, if you want to make sure that everyone ends up with exactly the same resources, then you're going to have to squash human freedom. No, you can't start that business because then you'll get richer than someone else, and that will be inequality. So there are inherent trade-offs in the human condition. We can argue about what's the optimal way of trading them off, but if we seek to make one of them perfect, we will necessarily minimize another. So there's a couple of reasons why you can, and I do believe in human improvement. I believe we've seen it. I believe we can reasonably hope for more, but not utopia, not perfection.